Hey there, everyone. So these are the directions for lesson 4 of unit 7. So it's mostly just a video on Edpuzzle to watch. I'm going to give you some options of works that you could do while you're watching the lecture. Some people asked for that after we had our lectures in the last unit, and they said since they didn't have to take notes, they kind of zoned out. So I'll give you a couple options for that. Let me go over what we're doing. So at this point through lesson 3, the US has now joined World War II. Remember, it took them a couple years to do that. So we're going to start off this new phase of us being involved in the war to see how were we involved in the war with the military stuff. Now, military history is something that many people enjoy. I am not a member of that group of people. So we're doing it through a lecture. It's a lot of trivial details to get through. If you enjoy that, good for you. Let me go over the big pictures behind all this. So, essential questions are number 2 and number 3. Number 2 is what were the effects on average Americans and groups of people? So, mostly here we're thinking, what was the effect of World War II on the average man who had to enlist and join World War II and fight? And we could also think about another group of the government in terms of the strategic choices that they are making in trying to win the war. So, those are a couple groups to consider there. Number 3, how did the U.S. federal government respond to the national crisis? So, one of the ways they responded was by joining the war eventually after Pearl Harbor, and then carrying out different strategies, including things like the use of the atomic bomb, in order to win the war. Remember, with this question, it's about figuring out how did we respond to the crisis? So when you get to your axes paragraph and you have to answer the question of were our responses the right decisions, you know what our responses were in the first place. Okay, key skill is context. So what we're contextualizing here is the broad picture of what the war looked like militarily. So what were the broad trends? What caused certain events to happen? What are some names associated with it? So we're not looking at any primary source documents. We're thinking of the bigger picture here. What is that bigger picture? Here are our concepts. The United States fought World War II on multiple fronts in Europe and in the Pacific, so that's what makes it a world war. It wasn't just Europe, it was fought in the Pacific as well. Strategic choices between the US and its allies resulted in a victory for the US, the United Kingdom, and the Soviet Union. So we win World War II along with our old allies Britain and then the communist Soviet Union, and that's going to set up some major conflicts for after World War II. All right, so it's important to understand that we do win the war and how that changes us and what it results in. And lastly, that eventual Allied victory was not always assured that it would happen. I tell you this all the time, that just because something was happening in history that we look back and said this happened, it does not mean it was destined to happen. It doesn't mean that it couldn't have gone other ways or that people didn't feel differently about the same event. Things were controversial in their own time. So always consider that. When you hear this long litany of things that happened, of battle after battle after battle, it feels like it was meant to be, but it's never like that. Things could have gone in many different directions. We're lucky that it didn't. All right, so let me show you on Google Classroom what we're doing with this. So you'll click on lesson 4. The video will be there for Edpuzzle. Click on it to watch it, of course. I want to show you the different ways that you could sort of process the information from this while watching it. 2 ways, one of which is through maps. So throughout the presentation, it'll stop after every slide to show you a map of Europe and of the Pacific. So if you would like to take notes about what was happening with the war in the different parts of the world on a map, what you can do is I've included these maps right here, and if you're able to print them out, and you could write and annotate those maps directly. Okay? The other way that you could do this, which I think is the better way, is to listen to everything going on in the video, and as you work through it, essentially make a timeline. So I'm not giving you a handout for this. All you need is a piece of paper. So if you notice what's on your screen, it's divided into 6 zones. So the first thing you want to do is fold that piece of paper in half down the middle. What you then want to do is get 3 more zones on each side. So you're going to fold it to about 1/3 of the way, and another third of the way. I know you can't see me right now. 1/3 of the way, 1/3 of the way. Okay. So if you do it like that, what you'll get is 6 equal zones, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. What you then do is you draw that timeline yourself, right down the middle one, and you put in the dates yourself, 1939 to 1946. So it would look like this. What's going to happen as you watch the video is it's going to fill in each of these different regions with events that happen. So everything above the timeline is about the European side of the war. Everything below the timeline is about the Pacific side of the war. And things will be labeled with colors that represent different events. So you'll have one timeline of the war, but everything from the Eastern Front will be there, 2 parts of the Western Front there, island hopping, let's see, the South Pacific and the Philippines. What you're essentially going to get is things will be grouped by color and in different zones, but it'll also be one complete timeline with dates and what the events' names are. And then if you need more details on what they are, well, you're watching the video, and you can always look at my notes that I have attached as well. All right, so those are your paths forward for doing this. So again, essential questions is, how are we responding? We're responding militarily, right? Context, big picture, broad trends of how did we start being involved in the war and how did we eventually win the war, tying into those key concepts right there on the right. All right, folks, that's it. So you'll see me next time. Until then, sayonara.